Hey everybody. While I'm waiting for the next installment of the Avengers: A Jewish War Story Part 3 is rendering, which is about 40 minutes long. It made me think about kind of the crazy stuff I said this morning, which I unlisted. For those that didn't see it, it was kind of spicy. So even I have to say, I was like, holy crap. But I thought I'd talk briefly about my very uneducated opinion about the whole Israel-Palestine argument and everything else. And, kind of getting some insights from this book, The Avengers. The last little bit, a lot of it is about basically, shooting Jews and everything else, in holes and everything else, which is very unpleasant. But it has to be talked about. It has to be said. But I think what needs to be said, though, was they found a girl who, was said that, these people weren't just being shipped to the east to find better jobs or something like that. They were being killed. So, this is one of those this is why you can't have an honest conversation about Israel-Palestine, particularly in the last little bit here. They're talking about basically we're Zionists. And, obviously Riska Korchak, Abba Kovner, and, Vitka Kempner in time. And I think really by this point she had accepted that she was a Zionist. These are folks that, they said, well, we're Zionists. What do we care of what happens to European Jews? And the argument went back and forth. If we're dedicated to going back to Israel and, creating a country, then why do we care about what happens to European Jews? And basically they said, are you going to look your child in the eye and say, what did you do to save the Jews of Europe? And say, well, what did you do? Nothing. Or whatever the case, it's kind of like the Patton speech, at the beginning of that movie where he says, your grandkids are going to say, well, what did you do in the war? Oh, well, I shoveled shit in Louisiana, that sort of type of thing. That's the kind of mentality they had. And I'm sure, we're going to get into some very heroic resistance against, the German Wehrmacht and the SS, or at least the German army, the SS, blowing up trains and shooting people, this and that. And maybe they'll touch on Tuva Bielski, or, the Bielski family, that the movie, I can't remember what the name of the movie is, but basically it's based on that story, of fighting in the forests against mostly, they always say the Germans, but of course, they didn't really care for the Poles either, that were the Gentile Poles didn't care for them either, and could recognize them better. But anyway, so it makes it that much more difficult because, of course, they fought against Nazism, this and that. But then they come to Palestine, and you had groups like, Irgun, as I said, that blew up the King David Hotel. They went through and massacred villages, and they sounded no better than the people that they had, than the people that they were fighting in Europe, in Poland, and in the Soviet Union. They sounded no better. I'm gonna go here in a minute. Okay. It's always something. That's okay, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. So, this is one of the complications, isn't it? It's like I'm not someone that's completely devoid of emotion or feeling. And it was pretty heart wrenching reading, that bit. But it's like there's a deeper story at hand, and to a point, when I was listening to the Gray Zone video, and they're talking about, basically is that they ruined the whole separation between it's just Israel and then it's Hamas and Hezbollah and these more reactionary groups, and that groups like the PFLP and all that, they're radical and in the sense that they understand class consciousness, and they're actually going to help the people instead of just helping a few people, and everything else. And it's just like, but once again, though, that's their attitude. These are people that have read a lot of Marx and Lenin and at least assume that they understand these things better, and that these groups would be more righteous than these other groups are, that the Zionist groups would be. And to me, once again, it's a very complicated issue, and ultimately it's not for me as a Gentile to understand, but it's interesting to say the least, to read these books and to try to understand the mind state that they had. And you're just you're stuck, in a certain way. It's like, well, yeah, once again, even people like Max Blumenthal said at the beginning of the video, he's like, it's terrible, awful what happened in, during the Second World War. It's like my family left Russia and Ukraine, based on pogroms and all this. But then, of course, then he's like, well, then we have but we have MBAs and all this type of thing. And to me, that's kind of fallen into the same trap that kind of placed them there, is that there were Jews who, said, well, I speak Polish and I can pass as, Polish and all this type of thing. And to me, that's kind of fallen into the same trap, and it's complicated, isn't it? It's complicated, to say the least. And ultimately, you can do all the mental gymnastics and all the sort of moralistic arguments that you want to about, but Israel will always throw out the Holocaust. They will always throw out the attacks, from Hamas, this and that, and use that as a defense. And like I say, but then I try to be, Mr. Big Brain centrist and try to say, well, the Arabs are, disconnected. They, they have their internal, conflicts, their own, partisanship that exists, between Sunnis and Shias and everything else. And it's like, it's a complicated question, isn't it? It's a complicated situation. And unfortunately, these arguments can be colored by ideology. They can be colored by what you wish, what your imagined groups will provide to people. And like I said, once again, that's as much as people, and this is me going, kind of like, but basically I see that as idealism, and like I say, things are going to get more complicated. Things are going to get harder and rougher here in the United States and all across the world, and I don't deny climate change, this and that, but there are going to be other people who are already deciding what's going to be done to at least pacify the citizens and the rest of society. So, like I say, it's a complicated issue. Like I say, I was talking about this in the other video and the other stream that I did, but basically it's like, when you see these groups like MAPAM, for example, MAPAM, and I suggest y'all look this up on your own, but, reading about MAPAM, which was a Zionist or Marxist Zionist organization, because like I say, Zionism was seen, at least at the time, as an anti-imperialist ideology. And of course, there were different forms of it. It wasn't just, they tried to stay in the labor Zionist sort of thing, where, well, we support the labor and everything else. We're not one of these rich Zionists. We're not one of those folks like Theodore Herzl. We're part of this sort of Zionism. And, it's one of those complications where a lot of ordinary people don't understand it. And so you have to become a political spurg that really has to, break down between, oh, well, this is the difference between labor Zionism and Poal Zion versus, people like Theodore Herzl and people like Zaev Jabotinsky, and all that other type of thing. And, it makes it hard. It makes it very difficult. And, a lot of the time people are just stuck in the middle, and it's one of those things. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things up in the air, and people are just they can either be pacified by alcohol, or people like me, are watching political videos all day on YouTube, or, you see some live stream or something, or, other people are sitting watching, some Western movie, kind of like my boomer dad. That's what he's done a lot of the time, just watching old movies, and we're all just kind of stuck where we are. It's kind of one of those things. So I think I've said my piece. Like I say, I wanted to keep that kind of short and sweet to the point. I relatively said that, it's the same type of thing with, the issue with the Palestinians. Let me finish up on that. With, camps in Jordan, and they are in crappy condition too. And that's something that a lot of anti-Zionists don't talk about. You're so worried about, Palestine, this and that, free Palestine. It's something where it's just like, worry about your own neighborhood first. If you live in the United States, why don't you worry about that first, then worry about what's going on there? And I know people are going to say, but I'm Palestinian, this and that. They're not going to respect you because they're going to see you as an American regardless, So I don't know. Once again, these complications will come up, and it's going to get tougher and tougher for people to try to figure out what's going on. And now I think I've said my piece, and I'll leave it there. And like I say, probably in, let's see here, maybe about half an hour, I'll be uploading the new video about the Avengers. Like I say, I do kind of put a trigger warning. I don't put actual trigger warning like it's a RedTube video at the beginning. Say trigger warning. This has, violence and everything else. I trust my audience with discretion, and that you aren't children that you need to be told, oh, well, this is going to have violence and this and that. Yes, it does have violence. It does talk about shooting. It does talk about, people stripping naked and everything else. But I trust that my audience can tell what the difference is and doesn't have to, need those things. So, but anyway, like I say, that's about a 40-minute video. It's still rendering. And it should turn out pretty well. Like I say, then there's a long gap. Just to let y'all know, there's a long gap talking about Wittenberg. And I said in the video that it was, it's going to talk more about the United Partisans organization, which is true. But then it's a big chunk of that. So that's basically what the video is going to cover. It's going to cover, at least in the book, if you're following along, page 49 all the way up to 103, technically. And 104, technically, but 103. So that's a lot to cover. And so I'll probably break that into two, see how that goes. I'll break that into two, and then it's going to go into the forest. So basically, they're going to be, I imagine they're going to be with people like Tuva Bielski and this and that. And yeah. So there's going to be a lot of good stuff in here. Yeah. Yeah. Anywho, I think I'll keep it there, and see you later. Hopefully y'all enjoy that video. See you. Bye-bye.